Chapter 8. The Bengay Standoff. When the workday was over, Sky and her rumbling stomach drove up to the local mom and pop food market. Set up as most grocery stores were in this county, the ample parking lot sat between the road and the blue block building. To Sky's dismay, it was jam-packed. She shook her head. Should have figured. The entire front of the store was glass with near floor-to-ceiling windows, each containing large posters announcing the deals of the week. Sky's gaze drifted across them as she walked in, determining if she needed any of the special items. Sky passed below the white sign declaring the store's name, Anderson's Market, in large, block lettering. She wondered, not for the first time, about the family. She had yet to meet one Anderson in this township, and she knew without a doubt Smiths owned this store. As the automatic glass door swung shut behind her, Sky came to an abrupt standstill. The store was wall-to-wall people. Overexcited voices reverberated off the walls loud enough to drown out the sound of the canned country music that played in the background. Wide-eyed neighbors and friends grabbed food off shelves faster than it was going back on. Lines at the checkout snaked to the back of the store. Sky's mouth dropped open. I expected crazy, but not this crazy. The rumbling screech of buggies needing oil alerted her to the fact that one lone cart with a bent wheel was all that stood waiting for use. The good ones were long gone. When Sky felt the air stir behind her as the automatic door opened again with new customers, she moved toward it. Better a bad buggy than none at all. She pushed her cart through the aisles and shook her head while people piled one or more buggies with several boxes of the same item. It was just as out of control as Tom had warned it would be. When Sky found herself adding rice mix after rice mix to her cart, she stopped and moved on. When she took a third peanut butter off the shelf, she caught the sad-eyed gaze of a little girl sitting in the cart next to hers. She handed it to the girl instead, then eyed the few remaining on the shelf. Sky threw out her hand and grabbed one, feeling a sense of security when her hand came around the smooth plastic jar. She shoved her buggy on down the aisle and rolled her eyes at herself. I have to stop this. I'm just getting caught up in the chaos, it's not like they're going to stop making food. Sky rounded the end cap and entered the medical aisle, threading her cart around a few others. She added a few boxes of Band-Aids and medications to her increasing pile. Then stopped short before running into an old woman standing in the aisle and staring at the shelves. It was Mrs. McCleary. Sky's neighbor stood there, distress written all over her body. Her white hair in a bun, and as immaculate as always, the woman turned her wide gaze to Sky, her trembling, blue-veined hands covering her mouth. Mrs. McCleary, Sky asked as she rushed to her, what is wrong? Can I help you? Oh my dear, her voice sounded more shaky than usual, there is not a single tube of Bengay left on the shelf. I can't sleep without first putting it on my shoulders. I have such trouble with them, you know. Sky did know. Mrs. McCleary loved to bake, often sharing it with Sky and the rest of her neighbors, but when bad weather came, so did the woman's arthritis. Delicious baked goods never made their way to Sky on those days. Sky checked the shelf where the product should have sat, then the racks surrounding it and behind the few items still scattered on the shelf. There was no Bengay. Sky nibbled the inside of her cheek as she looked over the products to see if there was anything similar. There was nothing. She reached into her own buggy and picked up a box of Tylenol and Motrin. Here, take these. They will help, won't they? Yes, they do, dear. Thank you. But I still need my Bengay. Sky turned to a harried-looking employee racing through the aisle full of customers as fast as they allowed him. She raised her arm to flag him down. Excuse me. Excuse me. Yeah? Arms full of product, he pivoted, irritated by the interruption. He had fallen behind in his work long ago. Sky kept it short and sweet given his exasperated manner. Bengay. Do you have any in the back? No, lady. We brought out all the meds this morning. All we got is what you see. Mrs. McCleary gasped at the news. I'll never sleep now. I only have one supersize ultra strength left. The stock boy took in her obvious distress, and his eyes filled with pity. He grunted, then added in a somewhat reluctant voice, I have a grandma too. He nodded his head at a customer further up the row. He said, that guy grabbed the last ones. Like, a lot of them. See if he'll give you one. Thank you, Sky said to the young man as he scurried off. Wide-eyed, Mrs. McCleary looked from Sky to the boy and back. Sky thought of all the times her neighbor had checked on her and brought her goodies. This was the least she could do. The woman was in real distress. Can you watch my buggy? Sky asked Mrs. McCleary. Mrs. McCleary beamed at Sky. I sure can. Thank you, Sky. I knew I could count on you. Sky gave Mrs. McCleary a weak smile. A knot formed in her stomach over any possible confrontation, and she hoped this went well as she wound her way through customers and carts. With careful steps, she wiggled past two well-built men in worn jeans and t-shirts. She didn't want to stumble into them as she avoided the rest of the crowd. She mumbled sorry as she stepped on the foot of one when she slid past with her back to them. Sky scanned the items in their buggy as she did, but did not see a single Bengay tube among them. The short, thin man in front of them, however, had at least 30 tubes, let alone patches and gel. Sky stopped and glanced from his cart to him and back with a look that said, Really? The man scowled. What? Sky rearranged her facial expression. Her current one wouldn't get her anywhere with him. She forced a neighborly smile and introduced herself, pointing out Mrs. McCleary. Yeah, so? He replied. Mrs. McCleary is an old, arthritic lady and a regular Bengay user. There are no tubes of the medicine left, and she is very distressed. Sorry to hear that, the man said and turned away, making no moves to offer her one of the many that littered his basket. Sky took a step closer to him. Would you be willing to give her a tube of yours? No. Sky pressed her lips together and stared at the ground before looking back at him. She is an old woman. She is almost crying out of her concern that she won't be able to sleep at night. Sorry, I have old people too. One tube, that's all I'm asking. Surely, we can come to some kind of arrangement. The man stilled as greed lit up his eyes. How much are we talkin'? Sky pointed to a large tube and made an offer she felt was exceedingly generous. $20. He uttered a low sound of indecision as he looked Sky over. Deciding she could afford more, he said, 50. 50? Sky squeaked. That is crazy. If you don't want it. The man nudged his cart away. Sky grabbed hold of the cool metal. Wait. 30. Nope. Sky smacked her hand down on the side of his buggy as she looked back at Mrs. McCleary. The old woman's face was fierce as she defended Sky's items from someone trying to poach her band-aids. She closed her eyes. How can I not get this medicine for her? Sky opened her eyes and flicked a glance at the physique of the two brawny men behind her. At least, I'm not dealing with those guys. She plunged a hand into her purse and pulled out the money. Here. 50. A neighboring customer yelled, Hey lady, do I got anything you want? Oh, great. What have I started? Apparently feeling 50 was too easy for her, the small man with the Bengay said, changed my mind. It's 60 now. Sky steamed as she reached toward her purse to pull another 10 before he demanded more money. Before she could, a large hand blocked the line of sight to her bag. Stop. A deep voice rumbled from the t-shirt-clad chest a few inches from her face. Before her eyes made it to his face, one box of Bengay came flying at her, then another. She fumbled, then caught them. When the little man protested, her defender stated, "That ain't how we do things here. Never has been, never will be." As some of the customers applauded them, Sky's protector and his sidekick pushed their way past the hoarder of topical pain relief before she could thank them. Sky watched the back of the dark-haired one as he walked away and wondered why his muscled body looked familiar. "Thank you," Sky yelled after them. She sighed as she took the medicine to Mrs. McCleary. After seeing the size of Sky's rescuers, the woman trying to steal the band-aids from her cart dropped them back in and stepped away. Mrs. McCleary's eyes were alight. Good to have friends like that at times like these. "Oh, they aren't my friends. I don't know them." "That's interesting because they know you." Sky looked back at them. "I don't think so." "I do. Mrs. Jones said they asked about you." A woman behind Mrs. McCleary vigorously nodded her head. "About me?" "Mrs. McCleary, I think you're confused. I've never seen those men before in my life." "I'm not confused, young lady. And let me just say, if things get half as bad as the news claims, you might want to cozy up to one of them boys." "Mrs. McCleary." Sky laughed and added, "Saying such things after I was so nice to you. Well. I'm old enough to know a good, bad boy when I see one." The old woman folded her arms. "You'll see." Sky skimmed the crowded front end of the store and found the two men. She watched their backs as they loaded their items on the conveyor belt, but neither one turned around so she could get a glimpse of their faces. When she looked at Mrs. McCleary, the woman's light blue eyes were twinkling. Sky humphed. "I don't like bad boys, even good ones." Mrs. McCleary let out a short bark of a laugh. "That's what we all tell ourselves, dear."